I heard through a friend of mine who also used to work at Amazon about this program called Neighbor. He said he's renting out his garage on Neighbor and he's getting like $150 a month in Detroit. I was in Detroit for a conference and I was like, I met him at Starbucks. From that Starbucks to the airport and Uber ride, I created a listing, put it online, and less than a month later, I had my first booking. And I started at $150 a month, and my peak month was like $3,400.
Welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast. We are all about scaling a cash flow real estate portfolio from 0 to 100 units or more so you can win back your time freedom. Time freedom is the new currency of the rich. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can click the link below to learn more about how you can join us on that mission. And if you're listening on the podcast, just click the link below, or actually click the link in the episode description to find out how you can join us on that mission. And I'm Travis Dillard. And with me are my co-hosts, Mr. Mitchell England and Gabriel Hamill. And we are on with Justin Cambra, who's our guest today. This guy is awesome. As I was sort of prepping for the podcast today, I was like, man, this guy's doing exactly what we're doing. He has a movement called W2 to freedom, like W2, your day job, your paycheck to freedom. We call it R1 here in the podcast. R1 is retirement number one. How do you actually get true passive income? Not bullshit passive income where you own a bunch of jobs and it takes all your time, but true passive income, mailbox money that comes in every month to cover your living and lifestyle expenses. Once you get 40 to 50 hours a week back, the world is your oyster. And Justin, man, I was reading your bio, Justin, about how you started house hacking not that long ago, which is actually what almost everybody does when they start. And now you're to freedom. So welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to be one of your guests.
Yeah, and like we warned you before we went live, we're super informal. Mitch asks a lot of dumb questions, and so just bear with him as he stumbles through his day. It's challenging for him. So
well, it's actually true.
Justin, I'm excited to have you on because I think we met like in around 2018. Yeah, you had reached out after a podcast I was on, but what's really neat about your story is a lot of people want to do what you did. You actually had a W-2 job. And I remember you reaching out saying that you wanted to replace this income and you wanted to do it through cash flow real estate. And in 2022, you quit your job and you went full time. You did what a lot of people dream of doing and a lot of people say they're going to do and don't have, for a lack of a better term, don't have the balls or the guts to actually go do it. But you did. So I'd love to get into that story. You're definitely someone that has stuck out in my mind because you're someone that not only wanted it, you actually took action and achieved it.
When you guys were talking about the podcast and I was listening to some of the episodes, you're talking about 0 to 100. I'm like, man, this is exactly what I did. So I'm looking forward to sharing, and I'm hoping I can help others that are like me, that were in where you felt like a dead end job, and get that inspiration to get out.
You did exactly what we're saying can be done, where you can achieve time freedom through real estate. But now you are actually validating it because people are tired of listening to us rant on about that. So we're happy you're on, man.
Take us back, man. Like, take us back to, right after high school or after college, right at that pivotal time. What are you doing? You're going out to get a job. Like, I just want to kind of like set the stage with like, what does that look like? And then maybe work through that transition where you're like, hey, I'm sick of this W-2. I need to jump ship and go build something.
Getting out of college, I grew up on a farm in Washington. So I like agriculture and I like business. So I said, let's just call this ag business. So I went to Washington State. I left there, went into Cargill. I was in animal nutrition for 4 years. I moved around to California, to Oklahoma City, then back to Washington. Got married, settled down. Then I switched to work at West Coast grocery chain called Safeway. So I was in operations, and then I went into corporate. And then I was like, man, now, and I ultimately moved to California. And then I was like, man, I want to get back to Washington. How do I get back to Washington? My boss at the time, she was went to Berkeley. She helped me get into Berkeley, get my MBA. And I was like, let me get back to Seattle with one of the power companies like Microsoft, Starbucks, Amazon, Boeing. These are all the big companies that were there. So I finally ended up, I graduated with my MBA, went, very fortunate, got my job at Amazon. And I switched from operations into finance because I wanted to do my own business. What I quickly learned is like, I can do it, but I don't love it.
Was real estate on your radar at all up until this point? You're going to school, you got a job, you got your MBA, you got a better job. I'm assuming a higher paying job. You move back to where you want to be. At this point, had real estate been on your radar at all?
So real estate was never, in terms of investing, never on the radar. I had bought homes and sold homes in the past, but just purely for a function of living there. But really my only, quote unquote, real estate experience, I used to play with my grandma Monopoly when I was a kid. And that was kind of like my early foundation of like 4 greens equals a red, right?
Yes.
And so that's where I really kind of had always had this kind of investing mindset.
And you still talk to your grandma after playing Monopoly?
Yeah, it was always contentious back then, you know. And I hope to live as long as she did, man. She made it all the way to 100. So
she went zero to 100 is what you're saying.
yeah, she did it before I did too. Yeah.
Awesome. Hats off to your grandma, man.
I do like I love Monopoly. I love, like, we play cash flow with Kiyosaki, the Kiyosaki game and stuff. But man, Monopoly is such a classic. It's so fun. And you think about it, like the guy that stockpiles cash ends up losing every single time, you know, and then the guy that's like cash poor, but's collecting real estate and is wheeling and dealing and leveraging and figuring out how to, like, he or she are the people that always win. And by the way, Mitch, when he says 4 greens to a red, that's 4 green houses. And then you trade those up to a hotel. I'll explain later.
Oh, thanks, big guy.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
Wow, we're going deep here. So Justin, let's continue on with your story. So now you're at Amazon. You get the job at Amazon, and then what?
So like, very fortunate. You know, when I was at Safeway, I was making a little over 100 plus bonus, maybe like 115, 120. Then go to Amazon. I'm supposed to make like 135, but a good chunk of that is what are called RSUs, restricted stock units. And, you know, that was back in 2013. Obviously, you guys know that it was already on a tear, and then I continued to on a tear. So, you know, through no fault of my own, I ended up making like 50% more than I should. It was like 180-ish or something my first year because all these RSUs. You know, I'm making the most money I've ever made in my life, but I was the most like, is just super frustrating because I was nights and weekends doing a job that, like, for me wasn't as fun and inherently I excelled at. So like I always say that it took me 110% for what people probably took 80%. And so I was like constant grind mode. And I was like, I got to get a way out of this deal. And it really wasn't until my kind of real pivot point is that my dad ended up, you know, he was sick for a while. Then we found out he had cancer. And then that was my like trigger point. He owned his whole business, his whole life, worked his whole life, never really got to retire. And then, you know, I had bought my first house hack as he was getting diagnosed. And then once he passed, boom, that was the moment, catalyst. And right after that, I probably bought 3 properties that first year. And then from there, I just started buying almost like every other month I was buying a property.
So Justin, you knew, I love this. Like, you did everything right. Really, like on paper, like you went to college, you got your undergrad, you got your graduate degree, like you got good jobs, you work for Amazon, like the holy grail of getting jobs and making good money. And you're like the most miserable you've ever been. And then we call this your why. Like, really, what is your why? What's driving you? And I'm so sorry about your dad. Like that's tough. Right. And so you had this revelation, like enough's enough. Why? I guess my question to you is, a lot of people can come to that revelation, and the next step is like, well, the next question really is like, well, what do I do to achieve time freedom? I'm not going to work till I'm 65 for the promise of some retirement holy land that may never come, or I get there, I might not have my health. So why real estate? Like, was there something, did you read a book? Was there like an aha moment? Did you drive by an apartment complex? Like, what was the aha that said real estate is going to be my vehicle to get me there?
Yeah. So like, even before that, I called, like, for me, phase one was like, for me to get out, I need to free up myself from debt. Because, like, if you quit your job, the debt doesn't go away, right? So I went 100% Dave Ramsey. Probably the worst thing I ever did was I sold all my Amazon stock and I paid off my $110,000 MBA, right? So I was debt free. Now I had any option to go anywhere, could quit, whatever, right? And then I started, like, searching the internet, Googling, and I'm like, real estate. And I started hearing about this Bigger Pockets thing. And then I started getting into podcasts.
Bigger what? What was that?
Bigger Pockets.
Oh, Bigger.
Never heard of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So that was kind of my initial foray into it. So it was Bigger Pockets. And then this other one was Rental Income Podcast with Dan Lane. And I was just like, oh man, I could do this. I'm like, this is for the average Joe. I mean, there's so many people that don't even have a college degree that are millionaires in real estate. I'm like, I should be able to do this.
It's the great equalizer, baby. Real estate in this country. It's the great equalizer. I love it.
Exactly. So then I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And really before the term of, house hack was there, I bought my house in 2016. I was like, I need to rent, buy something that I can have somebody help me. And so I was thinking of a duplex. And then ultimately I ended up getting something what I called the and one, whereas like it was a duplex, but it had a bunch of land. And so I lived in the 1 bedroom and then I rented out the lower unit. So I took my, I used to live downtown for like, I don't know, 2,500. Then I bought this property, ended up renting the lower unit for like 2,000. I think I paid less than $1,000. So I was lowering my monthly cost. But then I had like this large paved lot. And so I'm sure we'll get into this, but I'm renting that parking lot out for parking lot income. But my end game is I tear the duplex down. I can build 8 houses there today. And if I upzone it to my neighbor's zoning, I can do 12 houses.
Wait, so you're renting a parking lot to who?
Yeah. So imagine Airbnb for a parking lot. So it's called Neighbor. And there's a couple other companies out there that do this, but I heard through a friend of mine who also used to work at Amazon about this program called Neighbor. He said he's renting out his garage on Neighbor and he's getting like $150 a month in Detroit. I was in Detroit for a conference and I was like, I met him at Starbucks. From that Starbucks to the airport and Uber ride, I created a listing, put it online, and less than a month later, I had my first booking. And, I started at $150 a month and my peak month was like $3,400.
And that's just all just vehicle parking.
Exactly.
It's not even striped out or anything. It's just a big empty field and people pull up and park there.
It's a paved. So the reason why my parking lot's paved is where I live at. If you go back like 20 years, the guy that owned that house built 3 4-plexes next door and he paved behind the house for parking for the 12-plex. Well, then the next guy bought it and he split the 2 lots into half, right? And then I bought the duplex with all the parking away from that. So I inherently had this asset that I didn't capitalize on for literally like 6 years.
But you knew it was an area, big lot. It was that and one for you. The house worked on its own without that, but you knew there was some upside at some point with that lot.
We say this all the time. Like we tell people, look in your existing portfolio because a lot of times there's gold that you don't even see. And man, like I've never even thought of that. I'm already thinking like, man, I wonder what I can rent. Can I rent my front yard out? Like, I think that's great. Like, how can you maximize all the tools in your toolkit to generate as much cash flow as you can?
I thought the same thing. You mentioned Neighbor like last October. I totally forgot about it, and I'm thinking right now. I was like, I have a flat 1 acre lot at one of my like next door to one of my mobile home parks, and it's just sitting there vacant.
We have 10 acres in Wisconsin. That's so yeah, we need to work on that. I've got something. I want to go back for a second because like one of the things I think is really interesting, I'm sure you see this with some of the people you work with W-2 to freedom, is like we set out to achieve something. Like we want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a business person or a pilot or whatever that is, right? And we get that thing, we achieve that thing, but we don't realize the life it gives us. And like, I think that I'm always trying to rewire my kids going, hey, not to ask them like, what do you want to be when you grow up, but like, what life do you want to have and what are you going to build behind that? And I experienced the same thing as you. Like I achieved my definition of success, went to school, got the business job, but then I'm like going, oh my gosh, I'm time poor. I have no time for my wife, my kids, so I think that's an interesting thing. The second thing is I want to just ask you, like, what did it feel like? And I know your father had gotten sick and I'm so sorry for that, but like, how did you make the jump from W-2? Because I think jumping from a W-2, I remember the day that I quit still, I was nervous. I was terrified. I felt like that was secure. I'd been told all my life by everybody I knew that was the definition of security. And I was jumping. Like, what did that feel like for you? And how did you do that? Maybe just walk through that for a second.
Yeah, for me, it was not necessarily the passive income. So like when I was, even before leaving, it was probably a year-long process of like starting to build this portfolio up. I'm becoming a more established investor. I'm making more connections. I'm getting into, private money, creative finance, after talking with Gabe and getting some help there. And I'm starting to build this knowledge to where if I leave, I can start making more than what I am. So instead of $1 per hour at increment, I can make a lot higher dollar per hour like activities.
That's such an interesting mindset because a lot of people think the opposite of that, but you're saying, oh my gosh. And we always say this about R1, when you hit retirement number 1, you actually get 40, 50, 60 hours a week back. Like what kind of magic can you create in your life then? I love that you thought that before you even had all of the passive income in place. That's an interesting perspective.
I also love that, Justin, because I say a lot, like there's a difference between building wealth and making money. And it sounds like to me, you understood, like you were okay giving up the money because you knew that you had the time to actually go build impactful wealth. And you may not, it wasn't like a direct each hour that I work or network or build relationships or make offers, am I necessarily getting paid? But over time, you're building wealth. You're not trading your time for money. You're actually trading probably less time to build significantly more wealth. So, I mean, just such a hard, like a lot of people, it's an easy concept and a lot of people just will not do that. They're like, I have to show up to make that dollar.
They told me this is secure.
But we talk about this within Elite too. We have folks, guys and gals that are scaling to 100 units. We have this conversation where I'm like, look, if you had all your time, 40 hours a week back, even if you left your job and had a small runway, but you understand the superpower of finding cash flow asset, force appreciating, raising capital or creative seller financing, just one deal is all you need to like get yourself off to the races because you're not trading it for a job. I say 40 hours. A lot of people are working 60 hours. I know I was before I jumped. So.
But I relate. I mean, I was never making that kind of money when I quit my job. I was bringing home $1,500 a month. But I remember the same conversation. Like I could keep the job and I now have the properties that are paying me as much as the job. But if I leave the job, which was pretty easy to do because it was a minimum wage job, but to leave that job, I now had all my time, right? And like I could use that time to go put deals together, which sounds like exactly what you did.
I also like how it gave, I don't know if you did it on purpose, but like you sort of just burned the bridges. You're like, okay, I have, I'm going to quit my job. Crap. I have no income, but I have all this time. So, and also like I have no money. So I have to learn creative financing and seller financing. So by sort of backing yourself into a corner, you learn these skills and you build the mindset to go out and do amazing things. And I don't know, Justin, like I just quit my job, but like to you as an opportunity, like I can't wait to quit my job so I can make more money. Like it's rare that you hear people say that. By the way, on the house hack piece of it, for those of you that are like, I can't rent out a room, like I'm married or I have a kids. Like one of the house hacks I did initially was rent out one side of a duplex and then live in the other. So I actually had, we had a wall between my wife and I and our neighbors. So there's alternatives there.
Justin, let's go to mindset a little bit during that time, because when I met you, you were still working, but you had this strong conviction of like, I will at some point leave my job and go full time. So what was your mindset like? You know, you were house hacking, then you said you bought a few properties. Kind of walk us through that journey, because you had mentioned before we started recording that you were up to about 125 units at one point. You've sold some stuff off, but let's not skip over that. Like, what was your mindset going into your initial few investments and then scaling? We talk a lot about scaling to 0 to 100, scaling to that, 100 plus units.
Yeah. So we talked about that first house hack, and, I like to talk about, I had because I was at Amazon, and they always have these future carrots, the golden handcuffs on you, right? So I always had these RSUs out there that were increasing in value, right? So I always say that's like my M&M moment, one shot, one opportunity. I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future coming my way. So it's like, I had to spend this money in a way that set me up for the future. So I was taking the money, I would sell the shares, and then I bought the house hack. Then I would get more shares. Then I bought my second property, which I didn't even know what a commercial property was. I just knew I couldn't cash flow in Seattle. My brother lived in Eastern Washington in Yakima. I found on LoopNet an 11 unit property, and I was like, oh, this thing actually cash flows. And so that was my second one. And through Bigger Pockets, I heard Enrique Jevons, the king of Yakima, connected with him. He helped me purchase it, manage it. And then, that through that whole time, that's when my dad had cancer, and then he passed in July of 2017. And then that was like really the catalyst where I got it. I heard about Milwaukee, Wisconsin on Bigger Pockets. I went there in August. Through old coworkers, we do this annual golf trip. So instead of flying into Chicago, I flew into Milwaukee. I can expense that trip. Because I went there, did real estate, golf, and then did real estate on the Monday after the weekend. I ended up buying my first property in October, which is a duplex. Second one in December of 2017. Then I went kind of ham. I just was like, I don't even know how many I bought after that. I was like almost every other month for about 2 years.
Duplexes. Mostly duplexes?
All duplexes. Now, keep in mind, this is back 2017, 18, 19, right? Pre-COVID level, I was buying duplexes for, 60,000 to 80,000 that would rent for 13 to 1,500.
So you did this 11-plex before you went back to duplexes. That's kind of, most people will do a few duplexes and then they go to 11-plexes and then 25, 50, and away they go. I'm curious, tell me a little bit about the financing on the 11-plex. How did you put because a lot of people are like, what? Like, for Justin, I just went out and bought an 11-plex. Like, I don't want to gloss over that for people that are trying to figure out how to actually execute on this. Like, how did you finance the duplexes, and how did you finance these 11-plexes, this one 11-plex in Eastern Washington?
Yeah. So for me, like, you'll see a narrative in my story. It's like, it's not a problem until it becomes a problem, right? And I only deal with it when it becomes a problem. So like, I first was like analyzing these properties on LoopNet. I was like, oh, this thing looks like it can be a deal. I go ahead and like work with an agent, get it under contract. And then I'm like, okay, like, how am I going to get this thing financed? I go to the guy that helped me get my home loan, right? He's like, well, I can't do that. It's a commercial loan. And I'm like, well, what's commercial loan? Can't you do that?
Yeah, the residential guy.
What's a Can I just get can I just do 5% down and get a 30-year fixed loan? What's the deal?
Yeah,
exactly. And so he's like, well, I got a friend that works at this bank. It's a large national bank. And I was like, oh, great. So I talked to that person. They get me set up with the commercial loan. And we're about a week away from close. And we're like, okay, last final check off. We just need to see that you have 6 months reserves. And I was like, what are reserves? And they're like, well, in your bank account, you should have like cash for 6 months. And I'm like, okay, tell me exactly what you need. And they're like, I just need to see, I can't even remember what the number was. It was like 10,000 or 15,000 or something like that. I need to see that in your bank account. And then I was like, can I do a screen snapshot? They're like, yeah, okay. So like, I had already sold my Amazon stock for the down payment. And for me, I'm like, take max leverage, because like, if I don't take the leverage, I'm still going to be working at Amazon. So let's go all in. I called my younger brother up. I was like, hey, can I borrow $10,000 for 30 days? And he's like, sure. So he wires me the money, gets into my account. I do a screen snapshot. I send it. I wire him the money back after the close. And he's a good brother. He wouldn't even let me pay him to borrow it.
I love the scrappiness, but for those of you listening, like, I don't know, make sure you follow your bank guidelines, but make sure you're following the letter of the law. One thing I wanted to end before, I wanted to cruise over, like, a lot of times people think like, and I'm hearing people talk a lot about this. I think Dave Greedon's talking about this. Like, people are getting pissed off because there's people out there saying, just quit your job and go figure it out. I'm like, we're not necessarily saying that here, because
I'm saying that, Travis.
Yeah,
Okay,
Gabe's been saying it.
I'm saying it. I agree. There is a lot of pushback of like, don't quit your job. I'll let you finish, Travis, but I want to hear Justin's take on this. And I have a strong opinion on this as well.
And I'm hearing a lot of this lately, and it's a personal opinion. I mean, it's a personal situation too. Like, not everybody, like what Gabe's situation was like when he quit his job was, maybe he didn't have kids at the time. Maybe he did. I don't know. Like, all I'm saying is like, that's a personal decision, but keep in mind, like, you were buying these properties, leveraging, you had outsized income from Amazon. It was a means to an end. And sometimes we tell people like, well, maybe flip a house to then go buy passive to freedom. We call it like active income to buy freedom income, right? Or maybe get a full commission sales job and outsize your income. Like, everybody has a different journey, but I just want people to understand that, like, in your case, you were going to quit your job, but you were making a ton of money and you were keeping your expenses low and you're using it to go buy freedom income. But there's two sides of it. There's like this groundswell of people out there saying, don't do that. That's bad advice. Or these gurus online, they're saying this shit. You shouldn't do that. And that's because it's an alternative narrative and it's interesting now. So they're just trying to say something different. But like, I'm sure Gabe's going back to like, stick to the principles. It's a personal journey, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead, Gabe. Well, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, I want to hear Justin's thoughts on this, but I think it is personal, right? And I think there was a big push of like, hey, quit your job, become financially free. Like, I very much believe that. Like, if that's what you want, most people I talk to, they do not want to be a slave to their job. Right. They just don't. And you don't have to dig that deep. And so, since I've known Justin, he's like, I want to replace my income so that I have time freedom. Right. And I don't know why there's this big push. I understand that, like, hey, why you have a good job and why you have the income, but if freedom is what you're after, if you want that freedom, like Justin's dad's story is a great example. Same with like my father-in-law, my wife's stepdad. He retired and 6 months later passed away of cancer. Like,
Jeez.
Never ever got to enjoy life. Like, never got to. And that is a very, very common thread. And so I don't care what people do, but I think you get clear on your goals, find what you really, really, really want out of life. And Justin, I mean, speak to this, because when I met you, time freedom was what you wanted.
I'll interject really fast, but a job might also be like, I'm going to work for 12 months, make $100 extra $1,000, put it into a 11 plex, and then I'm going to quit. Like, I agreed. If you want time freedom, get out of your job as quickly as you can, but maybe use it as a tool for a while until you can then break through. I don't know. Everybody has a different journey, but I want to hear your.
All right, let's let our guests speak. Come on.
For me, what I'll say is I'm a hybrid approach where, like, I didn't just quit overnight. I was like 5.5 years in by the time I started really analyzing it. And there's a couple things that had happened, right? There's me getting into an investing. There's me evolving. So like, I tell this to like people that I coach and other podcasts. It's like, it was just me buying. And then at 19, I ran out of money. Then I got partners. And then I figured out, man, that's a lot of work managing the partnerships. So then I got into creative finance. Then I got into creative lending. Then I merged all that in together. Private money, creative, and then I started doing flips, and then I started doing wholesaling. So my whole goal there is like, I'm taking that jump from the W-2 world to the post W2 world to making that the smallest step as possible, the closest as possible, de-risking it as possible. So a blanket statement would be, don't quit your job. Exactly. Blanket statement is, Dave Ramsey, pay off your debt. That is for the least common denominator. As you evolve and get more educated and proof of concept, you need to. Because like what I realized is like, even before I left Amazon, like I said, I was getting paid more than I was supposed to because all the stock ran up, right? So my peak was like, I made 252 was like my peak year. I was supposed to make like 185, right? And then because the way the RSUs work, then I made like 220 and then 200. So I was like, I'm doing the same job, but I'm making less money. And I'm making this other money over here. I'm like, my real like catalyst is when I started doing, I was like, as I started getting more coaching to help me get into off-market deals. Because you can control your deal flow. You can control, like Gabe does, is control the financing as well. You can start building this income. So I started getting these off-market deals. And then through Charlie Arbor's event, I got to meet James Daynard because I won this charity auction thing. So I could go to the VIP room to have lunch with the Bigger Pockets crew, or dinner, I should say, with the Bigger Pockets crew. After I met James, I JV'd with him on some flips. And then I JV'd with him on a wholesale deal. Like with James, I probably made 125,000, just my half on these deals with him. And so in 2022, 6 months, I made 100,000. That was one wholesale deal, one flip. 6 months at Amazon, I made 100,000. And over 80% of my time was at Amazon. 20% was over here. I'm not even talking about the rental, which at the time I had 40 rentals, 100 something doors, right? So then I was like, this is, I gotta go. I can see, what if I took that 80% over here? I should be able to 4X my income, right? And that's really like okay, boats are burning. It's time to go.
I think your boats were just fine at that point.
Yeah, you built a bridge.
Yeah,
exactly.
A bridge.
The better
But Justin, let's go. I want to go to the mindset there because I feel like the temptation when you're like, oh shit, I'm doing the same work, but I'm getting paid more. And then the next year you're getting paid more, but at some point you had that realization, that 80-20, right? That like, if you spent more time on that, 20% that's actually producing, like what was your North Star? Like, you knew, for how long did you know, like, I'm going to replace this as your income's going up? I feel like there probably had been a temptation to keep that job, right? And then was it only after it kind of started to trickle down that you were like, all right, now it's time to burn the bridges and go all in? Or what was your mindset like then?
So as I started in 2016, as I started hanging out with more people who are more experienced, like talking to you, meeting people at meetups locally, nationally, I'm starting to get more confidence. I'm wanting to get out. It really was like in 2019 at that Charlie Arbor, it's called P&W Big Badass Real Estate Wealth Expo, right? And so I made sure I went to the silent auction and got bid on two things to guarantee I could have dinner with the Bigger Pockets guys. So like Brandon Turner and the CEO guy.
David Green.
Yeah, David Green was there as well. And so through that, I ended up getting that. I ended up getting both those VIP things, which ultimately were the catalyst to get me out. One, I got one day with James Daynard. I think it was like $1,000. I waited maybe even 9. It was 9 months I waited to cash that in, because I waited till I got a deal under contract. And I said, James, what should I do with this? He goes, I'll give you 25,000 right now, or we can JV on the deal. And I was like, I don't care how much money I make. I just want to do a deal with you. Yeah. And we ended up doing that deal. Ultimately, we were supposed to close March of 2020, which we all know what happened. James calls me up. He goes, hey, We don't know what's going on in the world. See if you can retrade this deal. Cause like the sky is falling in March of 2020. We don't even know if we can get our crews to work at this point in time. So I was able to renegotiate the price. And James is like, I'm in this deal because I gave my word. We could lose money on this deal. Are you in? I'm like, I'm all in, baby. And it turned out we totally lucked out, right? We went from potentially losing money to we made 82,000. And then he got 41, I got 41. So that's that VIP ticket I cashed in. The other one was with this guy named Will Bernard, who's like one of the original Bigger Pockets guys, probably the most posts on Bigger Pockets. So I waited a while until I was probably, I don't know, almost 8 months. I cashed that in. He lives in LA. And then I was like, I don't want to do this on Zoom. So I flew to LA. I met him, spent the day with him. And the biggest thing I got out of him was literally in the first 5 minutes. It was like walking into I felt like the Godfather. He was redeveloping this apartment complex. It's, down to the studs everywhere. He's at the end of it. It's hot out. It's like 7 a.m, the sun, except for he's in the shade. He's reading a newspaper on his chair. And I come up to him, he's like, we started talking and he's like, tell me about yourself. I told him about Amazon. He's like, oh man, you must be making all connections with all these people that have tons of money that want to invest with you. And I was like, no. He goes, you'd be a fucking idiot if you don't create a meetup so that you're the real estate guy at Amazon. The next week I created it. The first meeting, I think 2 or 3 people showed up. Fast forward, when I left Amazon, there's 1,300 people. Now there's about 2,500 people in that.
Do you still run it? Do you still run that?
I can't run it. It's internal.
Man, I got to tell you, you're hitting all the things we preach. See people listening and our people in our live audience or our elites or our school of scalers, this shit works. We always talk about, how do you, we don't say raise capital, attract capital. How do you attract capital? We be a thought leader. How do you be a thought leader? Just because maybe you didn't know everything, but because you're the one that's quarterbacking that meetup, people are looking to you as the thought leader and as the expert. And you already know how to find good opportunities, pair capital with said opportunities, create massive value, create passive income, hit retirement number 1, R1, and then go walk on a beach, like your picture on your website. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that stuff gets me excited.
It gets me excited too. What sticks out to me, Justin, is you're just a fucking action taker. You waited to go meet up with James until you had a deal in contract. You went all in. Instead of doing a Zoom call, you flew out to LA. The guy said, start a fucking meetup. You took action. 2 people showed up the first time. You left. There was 1,300 people. Now there's 2,500 people.
How much capital did you raise? Just out of curiosity. How much capital did you raise from this meetup group?
Actually, this is ironically funny. 0 yet. I ended up getting the confidence to ask other people outside of that network. Now, obviously, you can't borrow money when you're there. So I purposely didn't while I was there. But now, fast forward, we'll get into this, I'm sure. Before I left Amazon, I also got my real estate license to make another revenue stream. And how are you going to get clients? I made myself the real estate expert within Seattle at Amazon. There's 40,000 plus Amazon. So that's my client base.
I want to go into that for a second, but before that, a big takeaway here, you pay to get to the right people, airline tickets, auction, masterminds, whatever. If you're listening, realize Justin's talking about what all of us have done. It's trading dollars, which really aren't worth a whole lot, for access to people, taking in information, but then taking immediate action. And I listen to you and you're doing this over and over again. You're like, I'm at the table with Bigger Pockets. I'm flying here to meet this guy. And then they say one thing and then I implement it and then I take action. And then all of a sudden, and it's just constant. And I love this because I'm a big believer of this. I didn't do this for a long time, but since I have been paying for access, paying for the right mastermind, then taking action, everything's changed for me. So I want to point that pattern out that's so valuable.
Yeah, people need to hear that 10 times. He paid $1,000 at an auction got a deal under contract, met up with James Daynard, and then made 42 grand on it. Who wouldn't trade $1,000 for 42 grand? Like anybody would trade $1,000 for 42 grand. Not
It's
to
the
mention
formula.
Yeah, not to mention the education you got by working side by side with somebody actually doing what it is that you want to do. A lot of people wouldn't show up to the event. And a lot of people wouldn't pay $1,000 for an auction to meet with somebody
it's a
who knows
mindset thing,
right?
Like I just spent $55,000 on a mastermind to get in the right room with people, and I don't look at it as $55,000. I look at it as an amazing investment because I know I'm going to make orders of magnitude times that.
And now Travis is trying to sell me knives every day. It's weird.
I know. Stop,
It's
Trav.
Amway.
Just
I'm
stop.
trying to sell you shampoo. Okay, but you know it's great, so that doesn't.
I thought it was Cutco.
I thought it was Cutco too.
Yeah, he texted me about Cutco.
We had a guy
super awkward.
It was Justin Donald that was on that.
I know he's a badass. So
okay, so Justin, so you're You're out of Amazon. You just kind of gloss over. Oh yeah, and by the way, I had like 100 units. Like, if you were to sum up like your path from like this duplex that you were house hacking and renting out the parking lot, I get it. You got the 11-plex, and then you went on like a tear. You said, like, if you were to sum up like, what is the key to actually achieving true scale in a short period of time? Because this wasn't that long ago. Like, you're not 65. I mean, you look pretty young. Like, how the hell did you do that? If you were to say, if someone was to come up to you and be like, hey, Justin, like, what's the one thing that if you were to sum it up that allows you to scale quickly, what would that be?
It really comes down to, like, for me, it's all about the energy, and the energy comes from having your why. I'll go back to my dad. Like, I literally was holding his hands at the last breath. So anytime I thought about quitting, I closed my eyes on him in the living room. I can tell you everything that's in the room, the color, the placement. My mom was there, everything. That is the internal fuel that went the whole way. So, there's so many other things. Like, I went to Tony Robbins, right? So I learned to make my move and go. Amazon's guiding principles, bias for action, think big. And then I went to these different masterminds. And at the same time, I'm like, I consistently lowered my cost of living. I have an old car that's been paid off. I lived in a house hack, which I just moved out of last month. I've been living in a 1-bedroom for 8 years, right? So I make the most I ever made. My cost of living is the lowest. So I can parlay everything into ramping this thing up, taking mass risk, mass action, betting on myself, knowing that if I lose, I'm already where I'm at if I lose. So there's only upside in my mind. And so it all comes down to what I used to think was the most corniest thing is understanding your why. Now it's a number one thing.
Okay, you're gonna have to join the tribe. Here's our new fourth co-host. I mean, we have in the elites and School of Scale, we actually literally have like people finding like, what is your why? What's your why behind your why? What's your vivid vision? Like, if you don't have a good why, when shit gets tough, you're going to stop. You're going to give up. You're going to go back to the path of least resistance, the least friction. And so I encourage everybody, if you're wondering why you're stuck out there and you can't get the right mindset or swallow it and write the $1,000 check to be in the right rooms or join that mastermind or whatever, like, you need to stop and really analyze your why. And maybe there isn't a why. Maybe you're like, I like my W-2 job. I like my boss. I hope they keep me employed till I'm 65. Probably not, by the way, because you're a line item on an profit and loss statement. But like, at the end of the day, like, you need to dig deep and find your why. Now, unfortunately, your why sort of hits you in the head. Some people have to kind of dig deep and understand what that looks like. But man, find your why. I love it.
So Justin, you said something just interesting. I'm like, I'm listening to literally all of your words because I'm like, there's these little takeaways that I feel like we can unpack. And one of the things you said is like, I'm going to risk it because if I fail, I'm going to end up right where I am today. And that's so interesting because I think a lot of people, even that are still in the W-2 world, they're like, gosh, if I lose my job, they go on this like thought process of like, I'm going to end up homeless living in my car. But in reality, most of us can just go back and get it. In other words, like, use a job, use a W-2 as a foundation, maybe, or a last ditch effort or like a backup. But like, you're not going to end up home. It would take a lot to like end up on the street. Like, in other words, I think people miscalculate the risk of taking risk. They think they're going to end up on the streets when in reality, like, anybody listening to this call could probably leave their job for a full year, go learn real estate, go try to find deals, go try to make this happen. And worst case, you update your resume at the end of the year and you still live in the nicest apartment in town. So I think, anyway, what you said was really interesting because what is the risk? We live in a beautiful country where we can go big and we can risk without really risking that much.
Yeah, I flip risk the other way. My risk is working at Amazon for another day.
Yes. It's inverted risk.
That'll be the motivation you need, right? And back to that energy, there is so much friction against you. 0 to 100, you're trying to take off like a rocket. So first there's having enough money, then having the network, then the banks are throttling back. So yeah. And then my knowledge was throttling me back because in hindsight, when I look at it, I should have stopped buying 2, 3, 4 unit properties and got bigger, faster, right? That's why I'm selling now. I got to go. I'm doing my little Paul Abdul 2 steps forward, 1 step back because I have to liquefy 1031 and then reposition to go for the next phase of the journey.
What are you going into? So you're okay. That's a great segue. So you're actually selling your smaller properties and you're what are you going into? What asset classes are you going into and what is the economic implication if you sell a duplex? My first duplex I sold, I was making $800 a month in cash flow, 1031 it into a mobile home park, and I 3x my cash flow. I still own that park with Mitch. So tell us a little bit about your strategy there and what asset classes you're going to and what are the typical economic results of exchanging a smaller property for a larger one.
So for me, it was, I was in Thatch Win Springboard to Wealth coaching program. So, which is the inner circle, which is much more expensive. I'm probably all in over 50,000 Springboard. At one of the offsite events, and he was like, you got all this stuff. It's too much effort and work when you can have one high-end asset with better tenants that can increase your equity and then, build your wealth more that way. And I'm a little slow learner because I think he told me that January of 23.
I think you're fine, bro. It's 24. You're okay.
Yeah. And so then what started hitting me, I'm like, when I was at Amazon, I owned over 40 properties and I worked at Amazon. Now I don't work at Amazon. Now I do real estate and I have some development stuff, but I'm like, it's cumbersome to manage these. And there's just a lot of problems with these old dilapidated properties. So I'm like, now I'm into this. He's right. Less is more. I want better area, higher dollar amount, better tenant base, more stable income. Because when I was at Amazon, if my real estate was like this, no big deal. I got these checks coming in, low cost of living, high checks. When you're out of your W-2 world, you want this. You want, low variability of income. And so what I did is Jack Welched it, got rid of the bottom third. I'm selling Michigan. I only had 3 properties. For me, you got to go 0 to 10 or you got to get out of the state, kind of in my mind. So I'm getting rid of those. That's one less lender, property manager, insurance provider. I'm out of there. Then I had 4 partnerships. I sold off the properties within 3 of the partnerships and then distributed the money back to the partners. So I only have 3 properties with a partnership, and then the other, I think I have 37, so 34 that are just me.
So are you rolling these? Are you rolling these into larger Class A apartment complexes, 20 units, 50 units? What are the replacement assets, and what's the mechanism for roll? Are you paying your capital gains tax? You mentioned 1031 exchange? What does that look like?
So D, all the above. So on the partnership ones, I was taking the money and then funding my development stuff. We may get into this later, massive problems in the development stuff.
True. I hate development.
Yeah.
Twice as much. It takes twice as long. I do want to touch on, I know I interrupt a lot, but that's why Mitch and Gabe love me. By the way, there's 3 concepts you just hit on that we talk about in the tribe all the time. Number one, we do what's called daisy chaining strategies. You're doing 4 houses to hotels. which is what you're playing real life Monopoly by trading up these duplexes. Number two, you're trading them into assets that you can force appreciate. Duplexes are 4 units and smaller. Those hope appreciate. What is the duplex of the house down the street? So you don't have any control of the upside. You can roll it into a 5-unit or larger property, mobile home park, industrial, self-storage, something where every annual dollar of profit you create, also called net operating income, you can force appreciate the value of 10 to 20 times. So daisy chaining strategies, force appreciation, and also we call the PT ratio, the profit to time ratio. You're looking at deals through the lens of time, which is something we talk about in the tribe all the time. A lot of people just look at the deal through cash on cash or upside, which is great, but there's that third leg to the stool, and that's like, how much time is this going to take? That's why we don't like development, by the way. But yeah, anyway, so you're speaking our language, Justin. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want, before I forgot about what I was going to say.
Let me give you one example that'll check every one of these. Daisy chain, force appreciation, profit time. So I sold off some properties in 2023 as I started this kind of shift. And so what I did is I actually cross-collateralized one of the properties. I took that money and then I did a lease with the option to purchase on 2 aplexes in Iowa. I purchased that from a lady who I met at the real estate at Amazon who got into an asset. It just became too much for her. So I was able to get a lease with the option to purchase on that. So I borrowed this money, was able to do a lease with the option to purchase. I then go sell the properties. I take that money, I 1031, and I exercise the option to purchase in a subject to transaction, which then I put in a seller carry note. That seller carry note, I take the money back and I pay back the original cross-collateralized loan. So that's an example of daisy chain. And then I've since increased that property forced appreciation. Even before I even bought it, I increased the appreciation, because when she was telling me, hey, I need to sell this property, some guy locally is trying to buy it to me on this thing called Sub 2. And I said, stop, I'm your buyer. I burned his boats, get him out of here. I'm going to fix this for you. She went from 6 vacancies to 1 vacancy by the time I took it over. I was like, your property manager is not helping you. Your price is too high. I analyzed that you're like $100 too high on your rents. So I helped her increase the occupancy so that when I took it over, it had higher occupancy. Then I switched property management. Then I took out the machines, the washing machines. I put in third-party management. I have since implemented RUBS, ratio utility system. So now I'm basically 80% of my water expense, which is like $1,000 a month, is now getting paid back to me. And then it's Sub 2. So I locked into, at a time when rates were 6+, I'm Sub 2 on a 3.75 deal, 3.75% on, call it 700,000. On 230K seller carry, I'm at 0%. My weighted average is sub 3% on this entire deal. And I funded the deal through a 1031. So what I've learned is if you do lease with option to purchase, you effectively can control your 1031 timing, because you can exercise whenever you want.
Yeah, that's a good move. That's a smart play right there.
I wish Justin was scrappier and more creative, though. We should talk to him all about that, because he's really
come on, man.
Yeah.
You gotta get creative out there.
By the way,
this is
Sub 2,
just
for those that are listening, I don't know a lot about Sub 2, and I probably should, but like basically you're keeping the current loan in place, right? I mean, that's sort of the main objective there, which is really important right now, because as we're talking in September, or recording in September of 24, rates are like at the all-time high in 40 years. But the feds are talking about, maybe we went a little too far on this thing. So that's interesting. I got a question for you that's a little off the script here. Are you glad you got your MBA? That's like a big commitment, right? Are you, and like the things that you learned getting your MBA, are you using those in your entrepreneurial journey or your real estate investing journey?
100% all the time. Yeah. So like if I look back at undergrad is like learning how to be an adult and take on responsibility.
Mitch, you should learn that. What happened to Mitch? He got his undergrad and he's not an adult and he doesn't take responsibility or accountability. Anyway, go ahead, Justin.
So that's like your level 1 education, right? And it's really just like, can you execute, right? Like undergrad is not that hard, right? If you just actually show up to class, right? And then an MBA is like learning how to learn and learning how to deal with smart people, which then parlayed me into Amazon because like I'm hanging around with all smart people. I'm like, how did I get in here? I literally was on the wait list. Somebody dropped out. I got in. I literally got called like 2 weeks before. They're like, hey, we need your $1,000 deposit to hold your spot. Are you in? I'm like, yeah. So, and then I just got in, hung out with smart people, learned how to learn. And then, MBA is all about prestige. They want their students to be successful. They would bring literally the companies come to Berkeley. Amazon came to Berkeley. I interviewed for 3 Amazon roles and I ended up getting the one I actually wanted. And I ended up, being able to get the Amazon job. Ironically, I got the job in, I think, February, but I didn't graduate until May. I didn't even give my notice to leave until May. So for like 4 months, I had this secret of I already have this new job and I didn't even tell my current employer.
Your MBA got you in Amazon, but if someone wants to skip working 70 hours a week and grinding it out in Amazon like you did, would you recommend they get an MBA to learn how to be a real estate investor? Or would you say just like join masterminds, read books, get the concepts down? And I feel like I'm baiting you on that question a little bit, which I
feel like you're steering him a little bit here, Travis. What's your question for real?
I mean, I feel like I
don't have an MBA, but I'm curious, like, would you, if someone's like, I would like to get my MBA to become a real estate investor, would that be a good path, a good journey for somebody?
I've changed my opinion on this. So like, I used to be the biggest defender of the MBA. Mm-hmm. So like when I got it, my girlfriend, now fiance, she was like, I was already in the average US person, like MBA, I think makes 65,000 or something like that. I'm like, well, that's the average. Like you got all the Midwest MBAs and the coastal cities are not the same as the Midwest. So I was like, because at the time I was making more than the average. I'm like, you're going to make more money. And then it did. I basically made almost double my, take home by getting my MBA. For me, that was my only way I could see. But now there's so much, YouTube University, your podcast. There's so much content out there. If you can take what you learn and apply it consistently over time, I don't even think you need an undergrad if you're the right person.
So you're saying you just have to go to a real estate event, spend $1,000 at the auction, go spend a day with someone that's already doing what you want to do, and that seems like a much better return on investment.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you want to do. I mean, look at Shane, our buddy that went to a weekend course to flip homes. He nets $1 million a year. Now he's joined the masterminds. Or more, right? And now he's investing long term. I think it just depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, and I don't mean to get into this, and we're probably, I know we're past the top of the hour, but I'm loving this conversation, so I'm going to keep talking because I can. But like, there's this whole, I think there's a shift in like your line of thinking, Justin. I mean, I got a 4-year degree, like that's great, but I think there's also this shift in thinking where some people are like, man, like I'm working 60 hours a week. I give half my paycheck to the government. I got my MBA. I did what I was told. And by the way, I've got $100,000 or $200,000 in student debt. Like, and I think people are starting to scratch their head and question, like, is that the right path for me? And for sure, absolutely. If you want to get a good job and you want to double your income and rise the corporate ladder, I think that's almost like a must. But there's alternative ways. There's people are starting to realize that.
I think the missing point, going back to Gabe's comment, yes, spend that money, go to the mastermind, soak up the, on your way to work, at lunch, or after work, soak up all that information. But my key in the whole progress is I live by this motto, all great things come from the power of the increment. So like every day I'm like chiseling away to get better at the craft. So if you're in that mode, I don't think you need the undergrad and the master's degree, because in today's world, you're there's so many ways to be discovered and your talents be rewarded, but you have to be creating some sort of value that people will pay you for.
But also, Justin, you're one of your superpowers, in my opinion, is like, not only do you have a formal education, which gave you a lot of knowledge and a lot of network and all the things that formal education does, which there's some benefits to it, I believe, but also you're like scrappy and you're committed to never ending improvement. I do meet a lot of people who go to college or school or undergrad or graduate, and they're like, well, I'm the smartest one in the room now. Why would I need to do this or that or read this book or join this mastermind? I think that's detrimental to people's success. But you get somebody like you who's like, look, I have the formal education and I'm scrappy as hell and I'm getting in the right rooms and I'm continually learning. That to me is a superpower. And I think that's what you possess.
It's the accumulation of all the events. So like, if you go back and like, I was very purposeful because like, I don't even know who was on it, but on Bigger Pockets around 300-ish, somebody was like, you should go back to 1 and then start there. So I went all the way back to 1 and worked my way all the way up. Like of all the Bigger Pockets guests, through some way or another, like how I reached out to Gabe, how I met like at the VIP dinner, Brandon and David.
I still haven't been invited on that podcast. What the hell? Oh, well,
but it comes down to like, I'm trying to connect with all these people. It's so easy today. Learn about them, reach out to them on Bigger Pockets, talk to them at a meetup. Like case in point, when I was at the Bigger Pockets last year, the finance cowboy, I started getting into his stuff and I just saw him. He was checking out of the hotel. And I just went up to him real quick and I said, hi, love your content. Nice to meet you in person. Like just those interactions and connecting, and so that at some point in the future, be like, oh yeah, I remember you, and then that all these little things add up to where it's like, well, how did you do it? It's these 1,000 things.
I love that you said it's through the increment. It's like the guy that gets up every day and just what's the next, Mitch always said, what's the next domino today? And by the way, you're also saying your network is important. That's something that does Gabe say that every once in a while? Like who you know and your relationships?
I've never heard it.
I've never heard it. I think that was my idea.
All the
actually.
time.
But yeah. So, okay. Last question, because we're past here, but I've really enjoyed this. I was looking at your bio. You're a world traveler. You are launching this, this W-2 to freedom. Like, tell us what's the day in the life of Justin today, besides, being a badass and scaling your real estate portfolio? Like, how are you helping other people? Where are you traveling? That's like 3 questions. What's the day in the life? What are you doing? Where are you traveling? Like, just what are you doing right now? What's up?
I'll just go through and I have it in here. And I still do this. Bigger Pockets intention journal.
I love that thing. I use that.
Yeah. When I'm doing good, I'm doing this consistently, writing down the most important next step and actually doing it. Right.
Okay,
so like today,
I need to do that. Okay. I'm in now. I got to get back at it. Okay, go ahead.
This is my day today. So 7 a.m. I woke up at 5 a.m., worked out, came into the brokerage office, 7 a.m. meeting with my property manager. We had an unfortunate event, like an insurance claim. So trying to work something out with the owner of the property management. Podcast, or before the podcast, then I spent 2 hours on taxes. Podcast, then I have meeting with my virtual assistant to plan out the rest of the week. A meeting on my development project, weekly update. Then I do a coaching call with a client. Then I'm this one other development project. I got to check if the neighbors took the fence down. Otherwise, I'm going to sue them. And then I have a networking thing at 3:00. Another coaching call at 5, and then at 6:00, I'm gonna get my popcorn ready and watch the debate.
Oh, that's right. That's tonight.
Oh my gosh, I forgot that's today.
Somewhere in there, I got a real estate agent client. We're probably going to put an offer on a duplex that has development capability with it as well.
Okay, so you that's a busy day. You do it because you love it now. You're like at this point, right? You're not, but your picture was you're on the beach. So you have the choice to do this, or you have the choice to take a month off and travel. How are you helping people? You've mentioned coaching a few times. How can people get a hold of you?
The coaching is through W-2 to Freedom. I'm just starting that. And, like I said, I've actually increased my living standards. I went from a 1 bedroom. Now I moved into a 2 bedroom. The 2 bedroom is going to be my studio and my home office now. But yeah, W2 to Freedom, that's where you can reach out to me about one-on-one coaching. And then just like you guys, I want to create a podcast, get into digital products, and then ultimately help people to go exactly what I did. And my avatar is more of a high income tech person that wants to get their, these golden handcuffs are very hard to, it actually, in my opinion, is harder the more you make, because you have to make more money to get out.
Your lifestyle goes up. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And I say that to a lot of folks that reach out that want financial freedom. It's like the more they earn, the more they have to replace, right? And so I think the sooner, the younger, the faster you realize that you want, if time freedom is your goal and you want to do that through cash flow real estate, then the sooner you can replace that income. In some ways, it is easier. It's just a lesser amount of money that you're replacing.
Yep. I love that. And like Gabe's like, he figured out early. He's like, $1,500, baby. I'm out. I'm free. And then he gets 40, 50, 60 hours a week back to go out and just amplify that. So awesome, man. Justin, so grateful you're on the podcast. Like, it gets me excited. Like when we hear other people sort of echoing the things we've been preaching, because people, maybe people get tired of hearing us, especially Mitch. And so it's nice when there's a fresh face, a fresh word. So awesome. And I this is new. So we're doing this, for people that are listening, 0 to 100 has a couple of things that we help people with. We have what's called School of Scale, which is, again, like you said, it's digital products. It's a bucket of value. It's micro courses. It's accelerator programs. It's asset class guides, tax strategy guides. It's like a ton of stuff, and we're constantly updating that and keeping it really valuable. So go check out School of Scale, and you can also check out our Elite Mastermind. If people that have been listening, like, what the hell is Elite? Because we always like, on our Elite call. Well, Elite is a 2-hour mastermind digital every single week. We have 2 physical masterminds. They get School of Scale. So we've just like loaded up School of Scale. And for those people that really want to take the next step to achieve time freedom, which we call R1, retirement number 1, through the amazing asset class of real estate. If you want to know this, go to 0to100pod.com. That's ZEROTO, the number 100, POD pod.com. Check it out and hit us up. Let us know if you're interested. Whew. This show is brought to you by School of Scale. Anyway, I sound kind of corny doing that. I feel cheesy doing that. But anyway, Justin, thanks again. Any last words for, we have our final question. Any last comments or questions from you two, from Mitch and Gabe?
No, Justin, I just want to thank you for being on, man. I love your story. I'm excited to share this with our listeners, and truly, genuinely, like it's just cool to witness your journey firsthand from when we first met to today.
Thank you guys for having me on. My final word, like, we didn't talk about the freedom part at all in this whole thing, so I just want to kind of put a little carrot on this thing for everybody that it's not easy. Like I talked about, you have to have that motivation, that why. After that 6 years, it was grind mode the whole time. But in the last 2 years, I've gone on some epic trips to Iceland and Mexico multiple times, multiple spots in the US, Hawaii a couple times, multiple cruises. I'm going to Thailand for 2 weeks in November, almost 3 weeks to the Europe and the Rhine River boat cruise. I just got off of a 5 trips in 6 weeks. And throughout this whole time, I have all the real estate portfolio. I am doing these development projects, so there are large chunks of money. And then actually this year, I'll actually make more as a real estate agent than I did at Amazon. So you guys can transfer over time through the power of the increment from your W-2 world into the freedom and have that balance of, and you were talking about earlier, what is it like? I literally showed up at the brokerage office this morning, closed the door, and I walk in light because I'm my own self-driving power of generating income. When people go into work, I remember this, you get out of your car, back when you used to go to work every day, you get out of your car and you're like, I gotta do.
I love that you said that, because so many people are out there saying, they make it sound like it's get rich quick, it's easy. Like, you can scale. Like, Mitch and I got to R1 retirement in 3 properties, 104 units. Like, you can do it. But I'm going to tell you, like, I love you're realistic about it. Like, it is a grind. You do got to be persistent. You do have failure. You do have setback. It isn't get rich quick, but man, it is so freaking worth it. 100%.
Yeah. Once you get the cash flow, it gives you opportunity. Cause like a lot of people are like, why do you keep working? You know, I thought you were free.
It's a game. It's fun.
I'll never stop doing this, you know, because it's too fun.
Justin, thank you, man. Thank you so much for being here. You're awesome.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.